Just want to thank Karen for her great talk and all her good thoughts here. I have two things to suggest, and that is simply that if all of my Jewish friends in New York City were recognizable, they were in Penn Station, and they shut the place down, for God's sake, where are the Protestant voices for peace? Where are the Catholic voices for peace? Where are people that have consciences congregating to make sure, for example, that the genocide in Gaza is ended? I mean, isn't it bizarre that some people are talking about, well, let's have a humanitarian pause in the genocide. Humanitarian genocide. I mean, hello. So that's one of my shticks here. There's a really good example set for us by Jewish Voice for Peace, of which I'm happy to be a member. We had several of those same shirts at a demonstration in Raleigh, North Carolina, which you think is, the capital. Yeah, it's the capital, but it's a little dwarf. It's a little village, okay? And we had a couple of thousand people demonstrating 2 days ago, okay? And the organizers said, now, raise your hand if you're not Palestinian. 90% of the people were not Palestinian, okay? So there's a lot to work with there. The other thing I wanted to say is simply that we need to have people to give us courage, I mean, for me, that was Dan Berrigan. There was a whole retinue of people who weren't afraid to speak out, weren't afraid to go to jail, took risks because the justice issue was uppermost in their mind. And most people probably don't realize what Karen did. And I didn't realize what Karen did either until I saw Rob Reiner's movie, Shock and Awe. Now, Karen, you could go on for a long time telling what you did, but could you just give us one paragraph and say what you did, why you did it, and the risks that you took in doing it?
Well, I worked in the Pentagon at the Near East South Asia Directorate prior to, as they were planning the Iraq War, but before they were selling it to the people in the summer of 2002. So I got to witness abuse of intelligence, misuse of intelligence, cherry picking, and basically the creation of a quasi-intelligence backed narrative that was wrong, but that was pushed out and sold very obviously through a program, because we would see their messages internally, this is what we're telling you to say to your bosses in your papers that you write as part of the top secret world that you live in. Then the next day, the same exact phrases and words and issues were in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, and as if it was solid truth from the U.S. government. It wasn't. It was lies from a small group within the U.S. government that supported the invasion of Iraq, which they didn't get immediately after 9/11 like they wanted. So they had to divert from Afghanistan, which 20 years later, we see the results of all of this. But so I first wrote, I didn't do anything that courageous, but I just wrote an anonymous piece that was published in Soldiers for the Truth outside of the Pentagon. And I'll say this, and this is the kind of, this always happens and you don't realize it. So I didn't know Colonel Hackworth at all, never met him. And he is not a big supporter of women in the military. Now, of course, I wore a uniform. I was a woman in the military. And so I didn't really, he didn't know me. He had no reason to believe anything that I said or that I was publishing. And I wasn't publishing classified, but I was telling stories about what was happening, what I was seeing. And I was kind of poking fun in a dark humor kind of way. Insider notes from the Pentagon is what he called the column. And I would give these to him and he would publish them. And we never met. We never spoke. And I said, well, why later? I wondered, why would he have taken that? And it turns out he had tons of friends in the Pentagon and they were all telling him the same thing I was telling them. They weren't putting it in, articles, but he was getting the message. And so there's a lot of people that they just need maybe one person to get out there. And then I did later directly talk with the reporters, and that's what the movie talks about, because it showcases Knight Ritter's actual reporting that was done prior to this. They did a great job, and part of it was they actually found people like me, and of course I found them because they were publishing the truth, and I reached out to them. And of course, Ray makes it sound like I risked a lot. I because I was able to retire quickly after this, I didn't risk very much. But I did, yeah. If they would have done terrible things to me if they had identified me as the culprit, the person who was a little tiny voice of perspective and truth, perhaps inside the Pentagon. But anyway, depending on where we are, we can all do something. And maybe I was ignorant of the risk, but I think I was aware of the risk. And I'll say this, and Ray's heard me say this a number of times. I worked with a lot of people, colonels, lieutenant colonels, senior civilians, and they all, where I was in the Pentagon 2002, early 2003, they all knew what I was. They were educating me, and they were very frustrated with the lies that our government was telling. But these folks intended, for a number of reasons, where they were in their lives, kids going to college, wife has a big mortgage or wants to stay in the house with the big mortgage, whatever it was. And they got themselves out. They called up their assignments officer and said, I can't work in this environment. These people are crazy. They're lying. They're making a war that they won't listen to anybody. You can't correct this. And so they called their assignments officers, whether it was the Navy, the Army, Air Force, and they got new assignments, and they curtailed their 3-year Pentagon assignments, which are considered very choice assignments for many people. You want to punch that ticket and you want to get that full 3 years, but that's the risk they took. I'll shorten that assignment so I can live with myself and still retain the ability to work in the military industrial complex after I retire, which is what most of them wanted to do. So, I think we have to, and you guys don't have this problem, but there are many people in this country that are living a life that is funded by the government. And just like the all volunteer force, you signed up, we're paying you great money, shut up and do what we tell you to do. We'll go to war whenever we want to, not when the Constitution says it's declared. We don't, you've already given up your liberty. Well, I didn't give my liberty up. And I think if we hold on to that and we say, I'm an American, there's truth. I see it. I'm going to say it, and nobody can shut me up. Maybe we can encourage that. And again, in this current environment, 23 years after what I remember of speaking the truth, we still have the problem. We can't hear the truth when it's being told in our society. And again, that's because mainstream media and the military industrial complex, the Mickey Mouse, does not want us to listen to other voices. They're doing a good job of shutting everybody down and putting people into corners and little holes, and so they can't speak, or they're afraid to speak. So it's about, we do have to encourage people to have courage. But I'll tell you, people that are worried about their families, and increasingly, maybe we're older and we're okay, but there are a lot of young people. I got 4 kids. 2 of my 4 live paycheck to paycheck. If one job is lost, they're on the street. So imagine if their job was working for the federal government, in some part of the federal government that was creating and fomenting wars and using lies to do it, was selectively conducting injustice. And that can be domestic government agencies as well. Whether you could Homeland Defense, you could look at what they're doing in different places. You've got the FBI, the abuse that they're giving people. If you're working in one of those agencies and you need that very next paycheck, because that's the life you live, that's the mortgage you have, you are not going to be courageous, because it's not just you're being courageous, it's your family, it's your children. And that's what we all put first. So I think I was in a position where I knew I was leaving Washington. I had no desire ever to work for any government agency or contractor. I did not want to live in an urban area. And I said, we're going to move and we're going to make it work. And we did, and we can do that. But that doesn't mean, I appreciate the commitments that other people have, but we do need to help people, maybe our own children. Maybe we need to help our own kids and our own friends and nephews and nieces who are in situations to feel comfortable that, yes, you might lose your job, but if it's to speak the truth and to make peace, and to uphold principles that we all share, it might be worth it. So we have to encourage people to be courageous. And I think, I don't want to pick on people and say they're not courageous, but so many of them are invested and dependent on their jobs. I mean, think about even in, company, commercial or corporate whistleblowers. Sometimes they can't whistleblow, because if they do, it's not just them on the street with no food, it's the whole family. So we have to help each other and build a network where we can speak, and also that we can take care of people. But I don't know, I don't want to pick on people that aren't, what we use that word courageous, but how can we, what you said, Ray, that's exactly right. How do we need to make more people feel confident and courageous. And again, when I mentioned those young people on TikTok saying they're not going to be in the military, I like that, because that kid can be courageous. He's being courageous. He doesn't even realize what he said. I'm not going to obey the government. I love it. I love it. We have to, instead of ridiculing that person, we need to say, yeah, I like that. I like your spirit. I like your spirit. Let's have more of that.